One introduction ROSEP view the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. ROSEP view purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or ROSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this ROSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025 and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning, with the adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHYAFX, December 31st, 2025 Cheap Solar is transforming lives and economies in Africa. In Webisode 57DHYAFX, 1 Health and Medicine Eyesight, the best and worst habits for eyesight. Are carrots good? Is blue light bad? 2 Health and Medicine Fitness Aid. Fitness myths that drive experts crazy. Running is bad for your knees. The heavier the weight, the better ice baths. 3 Health and Medicine 10 Gut myths corrected. 4 Iowa Democrat wins state Senate seat. Fending off GOP supermajority by holding a left-leaning seat in suburban Des Moines Democrats ensured that Republicans would not have a supermajority in the state Senate. 5 Massachusetts Health. In medicine, Tatiana Schlossberg of the Kennedy family dies at 35. 6 RFK Jr. lack of knowledge of science and medicine. ACCV meetings only on Teams, not on YouTube. Who is up for some explosive statutorily required policy advisory meeting action? 7 RFK Jr. lack of knowledge of science and medicine. This is the damage RFK Jr. has done in less than a year after claiming, without presenting a shred of proof, that COVID vaccines played a role in the death of 10 children. Top officials at the agency have proposed a roster of new requirements for the shots, including several that critics say would be logistically impossible and could leave us with no FDA-approved COVID or flu vaccines. 8 Trump family business delays launch of $499 gold smartphone. U.S. made device plan by end of year after hit by recent government shutdown affecting shipments. 9 Trump ended funding, including to the EPA and science research. 10 Trump pulled funding of National Public Radio. NPR CO was a right-wing target. Then the real trouble started. 11 Virginia Health and Medicine decades of abuse by a Virginia Dr. R. finally addressed in court. 12 United Kingdom artificial intelligence used to subvert elections, although the motive may be more financial than political. China-based interference. 13 United Kingdom, Scotland, the Shetland Islands, Archipelago, Lerwick. Wood-burning tradition. The wood burning in Lerwick contributes to climate change with the emission of carbon dioxide and PM 2.5 and creates air pollution that harms human life and shortens human lives. Some traditions are so stupid they should not be honored, and the old bad traditions of the past should not be reenacted. 15 Europe and United Kingdom mass transit interrupted. Eurostar cancels all trains after power failure in Channel Tunnel. 16 Ukraine bogus claim that Ukraine attack near a Putin residence aims to push Trump toward supporting Russia over Ukraine. 17 Ukraine attack on global food security as Russia hits wheat ships and ports. U.S. has verified as fake the claimed attack on Putin residence, says Zelenskyy. 18 South Africa solar energy from China. Cheap solar is transforming lives and economies across Africa. Main content: 1 Health and Medicine Eyesight, the best and worst habits for eyesight. Are carrots good? Is blue light bad? Experts weigh in on common beliefs. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, January 31st, 2025. If you were ever scolded as a child for reading in the dark, or if you have used blue light blocking glasses when working on a computer, you might have incorrect ideas about eye health. About 4 in 10 adults in the United States are at high risk for vision loss, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, but many eye conditions are treatable or preventable, said an assistant professor of ophthalmology and visual sciences at the University of Michigan. Here are 9 common beliefs people have about eye health and what experts have to say about them. Reading a book or looking at an electronic device up close is bad for your eyes. True, our eyes are not meant to focus on objects close to our face for long periods of time. When we do, especially as children, it encourages the eyeball to lengthen, which over time can cause nearsightedness or myopia. To help reduce the strain on your eyes, it is recommended that you follow the 20-20-20 rule. After every 20 minutes of close reading, look at something at least 20 feet away for at least 20 seconds. Reading in the dark can worsen your eyesight. Falls, however, if the lighting is so dim that you need to hold your book or tablet close to your face. That can increase the risks mentioned above and create eye strain, which can cause soreness around the eyes and temples, headache, and difficulty concentrating. But these are usually temporary symptoms. Spending more time outside helps eyesight. True, some research mostly focused on children suggests that outdoor time can reduce the risk of developing myopia. Experts do not fully understand why this is, but some research suggests that bright sunlight may encourage the retina to produce dopamine, which discourages eye lengthening. Though these experiments have mostly been conducted with animals, too much ultraviolet light can harm eyesight. True, there is a reason experts say not to stare at the sun. Too much exposure to ultraviolet A and B rays in sunlight can cause irreversible damage to the retina. This can also increase your risk of developing cataracts. Too much UV light exposure can also increase the risk for developing cancers in the eye, though this risk is low. Wearing sunglasses, glasses, or contacts that block UV rays can offer protection. Taking a break from wearing glasses can prevent your eyesight from getting worse. False, some patients who need glasses one eye doctor that they do not wear their glasses all the time because they think it will make their condition worse. That is not true. He said, if you need glasses, you should wear them. Even a little blue light from screens is damaging to your eyes. False. While some research has found that exposure to blue light can damage the retina and potentially cause vision problems over time, no solid evidence has confirmed that this happens with typical exposures in humans. There is also no evidence that wearing blue light blocking glasses will improve eye health, but screens can be bad for eyesight in the other ways described above, including by causing dry eyes. When we stare at a screen, we just do not blink as often as we should, she said, and that can cause eye strain and temporary blurred vision. Smoking is bad for eye health. True, a 2011 CDC study linked smoking with age-related eye diseases in older adults, including cataracts and age-related macular degeneration, a disease where part of the retina breaks down and blurs your vision. Toxic chemicals in cigarettes enter your bloodstream and damage sensitive tissues in the eyes, including the retinal lens and macula. Carrots are good for your eyes. True, while a diet full of carrots will not give you perfect vision, some evidence suggests that the nutrients in them are good for eye health. One large clinical trial found that antioxidants like beta-carotene and vitamin C and E could slow the progression of age-related macular degeneration. Following an antioxidant-rich diet will not necessarily prevent an eye disease from occurring, but it can be helpful, particularly for people with early macular degeneration. Worsening eyesight is an inevitable part of aging for everyone. False, many of us can expect that our eyesight will deteriorate at least a little bit with age, but quite a few causes of declining eyesight in adulthood, including age-related macular degeneration, cataracts, and glaucoma, are preventable or treatable if you catch them early. If your vision is starting to to wane, do not dismiss it as just aging. Seeing an optometrist or ophthalmologist right away or regularly every year will give you the best chance of staving off these conditions. 2. Health and Medicine. 8. Fitness myths that drive experts crazy. Running is bad for your knees. The heavier the weight, the better. Ice baths. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, June 20th, 2024. When done right, exercise can be a veritable miracle drug, but follow the wrong advice, and you can easily set yourself up for injury. Take the sit-up. It can make low back pain worse. Myth 1. You should stretch before you work out. Stretching a muscle for more than 90 seconds temporarily diminishes its strength. If you really enjoy the feeling of stretching before physical activity, do not hold the stretch for long. Save your stretching for a separate time. I like to tell people to do it before bed, since it gives your muscles time to recover before moving again. Myth 2. You need to lift heavy weights to build muscle. Not true. Lifting relatively light weights for say 30 repetitions is just as effective at building muscle and strength as lifting weights that feel heavier for 5 to 12 reps. But do not avoid heavy weights for fear that they will make you bulk up. It does not just happen with typical strength training. Myth 3. Running destroys your knees. In fact, not moving increases your risk of developing osteoarthritis. For years, experts thought that our knees were like tires, and when you drive the car a lot, you burn through your tire tread. That is not true. Our joints can regenerate themselves, especially when we are regularly active. That said, running can definitely lead to knee pain or injury if you train too aggressively by running too fast or too far too soon. If you start to feel knee pain, get it checked out by a sports medicine expert. Myth 4. Walking is enough to keep you fit as you age. Myth 6. Runners and cyclists do not need to strength train their lower body. Pounding the pavement or pushing pedals does strengthen your lower body, but not enough to stimulate significant muscle growth. A strength training regimen that includes squats, lunges, glut bridges, and pointers can improve bone density and lower your risk of injury and make you a stronger runner or cyclist. 2. Myth 7. You need 10,000 steps a day to be healthy. No exercise scientists debunked this 1 year ago, but many Americans still see it as a benchmark of good health. The myth traces back to the 1960s, when a Japanese clock manufacturer mass-produced a pedometer with a name that translated to 10,000 steps meter. There is nothing magical about that goal. The health benefits of walking plateau at around 7,500 steps, but even as few as 4,000 steps per day can reduce the risk of dying from any cause. 3. Health and Medicine. 10. Gut myths. Corrected excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, January 22nd, 2025. Myth 4. Stress can cause ulcers. Doctors used to think that peptic ulcers, open sores in the stomach's lining or the first section of the small intestine, were caused by stress or other lifestyle factors, like eating spicy foods. That thinking was overturned in the 1980s when scientists discovered that Helicobacter pylori, a bacterium that bores into the protective lining of the stomach, caused many peptic ulcers. Frequent use of nonsteroidal drugs against inflammation, like aspirin, ibuprofen, and naproxen, can also cause them. Failing to treat the root cause of ulcers with antibiotics if they are caused by H. pylori, or by reducing the use of NSAIDs if they are the culprit, for example, can allow them to recur. Recurrent ulcers can increase the risk of bleeding or a blockage or a hole forming in the stomach or small intestine. Untreated H. pylori infections can also increase the risk of stomach cancer. Myth 6. Colorectal cancer mainly affects older people. In medical school in the early 2000s, doctors were taught that colorectal cancer was a disease of older adults, but its rates have climbed in younger people, and it is now the leading cause of cancer-related deaths among men under 50 and the second most common among women in that age group. Today, medical students are told that when adults have changes in their bowel habits, unexplained weight loss, or blood in their stool, colorectal cancer should be on their list to rule out. Because the early stages of colorectal cancer often do not have symptoms, everyone should get screened with a colonoscopy or an at-home stool test starting at age 45 or sooner if you have certain risk factors. Myth 7. Diverticulitis is caused by eating nuts and popcorn. Diverticulitis occurs when small pouches in the wall of the colon become inflamed, causing abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, constipation, cramping, or fever. Doctors used to say that if you are prone to diverticulitis, you should avoid eating nut seeds and popcorn, thinking they might get stuck in the colon wall and cause inflammation, but that turned out to be wrong. Dr. Ahuja said these foods such as nuts and fiber contain fiber, which is associated with a reduced risk of diverticulitis. Myth 9. IBS is all in your head. Abdominal pain, bloating, diarrhea, constipation. The symptoms of IBS are real and can be debilitating, but the condition has historically come with some stigma, in part because it does not have a diagnostic test. Scientists do not fully understand its cause, and certain mental health conditions like anxiety and depression can worsen it. Even today, some health providers may not take the condition seriously, leaving many patients feeling dismissed as crazy. IBS is a disorder of the gut-brain interaction. Some nerves in the gut, such as those that sense pain, for example, can be extra sensitive, which can cause even normal digestive functions to cause feelings of pain. Even though mental health can play a role in IBS, that does not make the condition any less real or worth treating. Myth 10. Everyone should take probiotics for gut health. Thousands of microbial species live in your gut, so it is unlikely that a small capsule containing just one or a few living strains would do much to improve it. And for some people, probiotics can make symptoms worse. Consume fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, or sauerkraut in addition to a variety of plant-based foods. 4. Iowa Democrat wins state Senate seat. Fending off GOP supermajority by holding a left-leaning seat in suburban Des Moines, Democrats ensured that Republicans would not have a supermajority in the state Senate. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 30th, 2025, the Democrat Renee Hardman, a member of the West Des Moines City Council, held a left-leaning suburban seat for her party, continuing a string of encouraging off-year election results for Iowa Democrats. Ms. Hardman defeated the Republican nominee Lucas Lofton this year. Democrats flipped 2 Republican-leaning Iowa Senate seats in special elections, breaking a 2/3 supermajority that had allowed Republican lawmakers to confirm the governor's appointees without support from Democrats. Republicans could have regained a supermajority with a victory on Tuesday. Iowa Democrats, who have seen their support erode in recent years, hope their success in special elections could signal momentum for the 2026 midterms. 5 Massachusetts health and medicine. Tatiana Schlossberg of the Kennedy family dies at 35. Tatiana Schlossberg, an environmental journalist and daughter of Caroline Kennedy, passed away after suffering from leukemia. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, December 31st, 2025. Tatiana Schlossberg, an environmental journalist and a daughter of Caroline Kennedy and granddaughter of President John F. Kennedy, whose harrowing essay about her rare and aggressive blood cancer, published in the New Yorker magazine in November, drew worldwide sympathy and praise for the courage and raw honesty of Ms. Schlossberg. Died on Tuesday. She was 35. Before her illness, she had been preparing to begin reporting for her second book, focused on climate change and the oceans of the world. She learned that one of her chemotherapy drugs, cytarabine, was derived from a type of sea sponge first synthesized by scientists at the University of California, Berkeley in 1959. Those scientists, she wrote, almost certainly relied on government funding, which her cousin RFK Jr. had cut. 6 RFK Jr. lack of knowledge of science and medicine. ACCV meetings only on Teams, not on YouTube. Who is up for some explosive statutorily required policy advisory meeting action? Ring in the new year with all of the 2025 legally mandated Advisory Commission on Childhood Vaccines ACCV meetings in one thrilling afternoon. Rozep top excerpts. Vaccine injuries are rare, but they do happen, and we cannot eliminate them. Having a no-fault injury compensation program like VCP is necessary to make sure that everyone is supported. People who are injured can get fair restitution, and vaccine manufacturing remains commercially viable. RFK Jr. hates vaccines. So I have a pretty good idea what he means by fixing the vaccine cord. He means demolition, but stripping the VCP for parts will fix very little besides appeasing the RFK Jr. personal yearning for mass death from vaccine-preventable disease. Retaining a functioning VCP is absolutely critical to ensuring continued vaccine access for millions of children. RFK Jr. cannot just remake the VCP to suit his vision. He cannot just change the vaccine injury table or close down the VCP. He has to have 4 ACCV meetings per year. He is limited by the law much more so than in other parts of HHS, where he has more unilateral authority. However, he could give the ACCV the old ACIP treatment and replace the current members with those who would be more likely to follow marching orders, since the ACCV can make recommendations to change the vaccine injury table on their own. RFK Jr. may try to install loyalists who will unquestioningly propose and vote on adding autism to the table. It will be critical to watch this closely going forward and raise hell if RFK Jr. decides to ACIP the ACCV. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Dr. Rasmussen newsletter, December 30th, 2025. Those of you following the ongoing collapse of American public health know that a lot of the action goes down at various advisory committee meetings. The crown jewel of these is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices ACIP, which is currently populated by the creme de la creme of the extended Maha grifter universe against vaccines. U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. has successfully stocked ACIP with enough people who are either uncritical yes men or crazed conspiracy theorists. Both of these groups are also completely inept, far less intellectually insightful than they think they are, and entirely serve the RFK Jr. agenda of taking out as many vaccines as humanly possible. So far, they have successfully recommended against multi-dose flu vaccines containing thimerosal, the measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, MMRV combination vaccine, and the birth dose of the hepatitis B vaccine. ACIP recommendations carry significant weight, and their move towards so-called shared clinical decision making, which basically means optional, will have profound effects on vaccine uptake. Although the ACIP has been quite successful in chipping away at herd immunity to preventable diseases, they cannot really do much about one of the RFK Jr. most hated institutions supporting vaccination, the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program VCP, sometimes also called Vaccine Court. The VCP is a no-fault forum for compensating vaccine injury claims. RFK Jr. is an attorney, and vaccine injury litigation has been extremely lucrative for him. He really hates the VCP because it limits damages and liability from big vaccine manufacturers. If the VCP were not there, he and his ambulance chasing comrades in the vaccine injury lawsuit industry would be able to make a lot more money. And if the VCP were not there, a lot of vaccine manufacturers would pull out of the market altogether. One way to get rid of the VCP is to make it go bankrupt. There is about $4 billion in the VCP trust for compensating injury claims, which is funded by a $0.75 excise tax on each vaccine if autism is added to the vaccine injury table list of eligible vaccine injury claims. It enables an estimated $100 billion in claims. The VCP would go bankrupt overnight. As the avowed enemy of immunization, this prospect seems to appeal greatly to RFK Jr. However, he does not have the authority to just end the VCP. The HHS secretary is required by law to consult with the Advisory Committee on Childhood Vaccines ACCV before making any changes to the vaccine injury table. The ACCV is the ACIP of the VIC. ACCV votes on recommendations for the VCP. If RFK Jr. wants to add autism to the vaccine injury table, then he has to go through ACCV to do it. If ACCV voted to recommend that autism is an eligible VCP claim, then goodbye VCP. The ACCV is required by law to meet 4 times per year. They did not meet at all this year. So they scheduled all 4 meetings for today, 4 30-minute meetings back-to-back supposedly for discussion. Only fortunately the ACCV membership has not really changed as far as I can tell, so they did not suddenly reveal themselves to be Maha operatives against vaccines out to tank the Vic. I watched this yesterday. So you do not have to, since you may have to wait for an online YouTube recording to become available, unlike ACIP, which live streams its meetings on YouTube. This meeting is on Microsoft Teams. The meeting was convened by Rear Admiral Krista Pedley from the Health Resources and Services Administration (HRSA), which is an agency within HHS that oversees VCP. There were multiple presentations on the ACCV and the VCP, including a review of how it works, data on VCP performance, scientific and legal standards. Although I know a lot about vaccines, including a lot about vaccine policy, I am not a legal expert. The most commonly repeated public comment was alarm and frustration that the meetings were announced with such short notice in the Federal Register, since they were clearly scheduled to meet statutory requirements, and nothing more. The majority of the comments expressed concerns that ACCV will not continue to adhere to established processes going forward, and that they will recommend adding autism to the vaccine injury table. I seriously doubt that ACCV in its current form would add autism to the table. All of the people who presented today were serious government scientists or lawyers who gave straightforward factual presentations. They presented either background information or evidence. It was not dramatic. None of the ACCV members appeared to have an agenda. They all seem like serious professional people who are carrying out their duties. By contrast, ACIP meetings these days are completely wild. Previous meetings have been dominated by the extreme contingent against vaccines, demonstrating both their surplus of bad faith and complete dearth of any relevant expertise. Watching the ACP clown car roll into Atlanta once a trimester is usually a stressful experience. No such silliness was evident at the ACCV meeting. It was pretty uneventful. That seems encouraging, and it is for now, but time will tell if it will stay that way. If you want vaccines, you must have VCP. The VCP and the ACCV were established by the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act (NCVIA) in 1986 because vaccine manufacturers were going to stop making vaccines due to safety issues with the pertussis component of the diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, DPT vaccine. The legal costs were too oppressive, and childhood vaccines are not profitable products to manufacture. People only get them a couple times in their lives at most. Contrary to what people against vaccines will tell you, vaccines do not make big money for pharmaceutical companies. There is a reason why Merck advertises Shingrix vaccine for preventing shingles in adults, but not Varivax vaccine for preventing chickenpox in kids. There is a huge market for Shingrix, but many do not know they might benefit from it, and it is covered by Medicare. Shingrix provides significant benefits in that it greatly reduces the risk of shingles in older people who already had chickenpox. However, this benefit is largely confined to those people when people are infected with varicella zoster virus (VZV). They get varicella chickenpox. Like all herpes viruses, VZV can establish latency. Its stable DNA genome can basically hang out for decades in the neurons of the dorsal root ganglia, a nerve bundle at the base of the spine. The infection can be reactivated by stress, aging, nutrition, co-infection, lack of sleep, or any other number of poorly understood triggers. VZV reactivation causes herpes zoster shingles, which is usually much more painful than the original chickenpox shingles, can be extremely severe, and can kill people, boosting existing immunity against VZV. With Shingrix decreases the likelihood that the latent infection will reactivate. Shingrix works great for preventing shingles, but it does not clear the latent VZV infection, so people may need boosters. Shingrix does not benefit people who have never had VZV if they received Varivax, because the varicella vaccine, whether alone or in combination with the measles, mumps, rubella MMR vaccine, prevents VZV from establishing latency in the first place. The people immunized with 2 doses of Varivax on the childhood schedule will never get chickenpox, so they will never get shingles. So Merck focuses its marketing resources on raising awareness of the untapped adult market that might benefit from Shingrix and can produce a meaningful return for the corporation, not the unchanging 2-time pool of children who automatically get Varivax. Merck is able to profit, as vaccine manufacturers must do. Being businesses in a capitalist economy, older people benefit from a vaccine that reduces their risk of a painful and life-threatening disease, and children still get vaccines that spare them from facing the same fate decades down the road. Some vaccines can be profitable, but the stalwarts of the vaccine schedule, like the MMR, are not. The government does not manufacture vaccines. They rely on pharmaceutical companies with the facilities and expertise required to do it. Pharmaceutical companies are businesses that need to make money to sustain the business. If the government considers it a public benefit to immunize its population, then it needs to subsidize it. One way of subsidizing vaccines is to incentivize manufacturers to make them, so there is a steady, affordable supply by ensuring they are protected from catastrophic liability. Although the benefits of vaccination demonstrably outweigh the risks, vaccines injuries can and do occur very infrequently, so manufacturers can never eliminate this risk completely. You cannot cure unexpected anaphylaxis, undetected immune deficiencies, or undiagnosed genetic disorders that increase the risk of a vaccine injury. And if the cost of litigation drives up the cost of making a vaccine to the point that the manufacturer's solvency is at risk, that manufacturer might stop making that vaccine. The NCVIA was passed because manufacturers were going to pull out of the market altogether to avoid more potentially business-destroying pertussis vaccine injury claims by creating the VCPV. NCVIA incentivized Merck, GSK, and Sanofi, manufacturers of most of the childhood vaccines on the schedule, to accept the liability and lack of windfall profits that comes with making these essential medicines. Vaccine injuries are rare, but they do happen, and we cannot eliminate them. Having a no-fault injury compensation program like VCP is necessary to make sure that everyone is supported. People who are injured can get fair restitution, and vaccine manufacturing remains commercially viable. VCP squad. While the VCP remains intact for now, RFK Jr. has not exactly been discreet about his intentions for it. He has repeatedly stated his intention to fix it. I am always deeply suspicious of people with no other qualifications besides unearned confidence who claim they can fix something that might need some work, but is not irreparably broken if you are not a licensed and bonded plumber. Then I do not want to hear any of your empty assurances about fixing my clogged toilet. RFK Jr. hates vaccines, so I have a pretty good idea what he means by fixing the vaccine court. He means demolition, but stripping the VCP for parts will fix very little besides appeasing the RFK Jr. personal yearning for mass death from vaccine-preventable disease. Retaining a functioning VCP is absolutely critical to ensuring continued vaccine access for millions of children because it was the result of the NCVIA and is bound by its statutory constraints. RFK Jr. cannot just remake the VCP to suit his vision. He cannot just change the vaccine injury table or close down the VCP. He has to have 4 ACCV meetings per year. He is limited by the law much more so than in other parts of HHS where he is more unilateral authority. However, he could give the ACCV the old ACIP treatment and replace the current members with those who would be more likely to follow marching orders. Since the ACCV can make recommendations to change the vaccine injury table on their own, RFK Jr. may try to install loyalists who will unquestioningly propose and vote on adding autism to the table. It will be critical to watch this closely going forward and raise hell if RFK Jr. decides to ACIP the ACCV. 7. RFK Jr. lack of knowledge of science and medicine. This is the damage RFK Jr. has done in less than a year. Rosep top excerpts after claiming, without presenting a shred of proof, that COVID vaccines played a role in the death of 10 children. Top officials at the agency have proposed a roster of new requirements for the shots, including several that critics say would be logistically impossible and could leave us with no FDA-approved COVID or flu vaccines. Decades of research has debunked the assertion that vaccines cause autism, but RFK Jr. and his supporters have proved astoundingly impervious to that evidence. Excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The New York Times, December 30th, 2025. In the days before Christmas, as measles, whooping cough, and influenza continued to spread and surge across the country, the Department of Health and Human Services came perilously close to scrapping the U.S. long-standing list of recommended childhood vaccines. The HHS agency plan was to go with a shorter list along the lines of what Denmark recommends. That plan was jettisoned at the last minute over legal and political concerns. Sources in and around the department have since suggested that something far worse may still be in the offing. They could still move to align us with a country like Denmark, said Dr. D.D., a former director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Respiratory Disease Division. He resigned in August in protest of the HHS politicization of vaccine policy, but they could also just scrap the list altogether so that there are no official recommendations, only vague suggestions. The CDC list, also known as the Childhood Vaccine Schedule, helps determine which vaccines are covered by insurance, which are included in the Vaccines for Children program that supplies crucial shots to the and underinsured, and which are protected from certain liabilities that might otherwise drive vaccine makers from the U.S. market. Altering those recommendations or downgrading them to shared clinical decision-making would upend those protocols and could make it nearly impossible for millions of families to receive certain life-saving vaccines, even if they still want them. However, neither move would be surprising. In the 11 months since he was confirmed as health Secretary, RFK Jr. has wreaked steady havoc on the U.S. vaccination policies and programs. He canceled hundreds of millions of dollars in federal investment for mRNA vaccines, including ones that would have improved our ability to fight the next flu pandemic. He chased away doctors and scientists at the Food and Drug Administration and the CDC, who oversaw federal vaccine policy for decades. Perhaps worst of all, he fired the entire 17-member advisory committee on immunization practices, known as ACIP. The group is responsible for advising the CDC on which vaccines to recommend for whom. It now consists of a mix of ideologues and incompetence handpicked by RFK Jr. himself. Already, this new Potemkin group has rescinded recommendations for any flu shots containing thimerosal, a preservative that keeps multidose vaccine bottles free of bacteria and other contamination. It has been in use for nearly a century and has data over decades validating its safety. Revoked a long-standing recommendation of the measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox, or MMRV combination vaccine for children younger than 4. The policy change is not based on any valid medical or scientific concern. Stopped recommending COVID-19 vaccines for healthy people younger than 65 unless they talk to a healthcare provider, a move that makes it harder for people who want or need those shots to get them changed. The recommendations for hepatitis B vaccination, from saying that all newborns should have this shot to new mothers who test negative should decide for themselves whether to have their babies vaccinated at birth, but might consider waiting. None of these changes are evidence-based. All of them run counter to what the CDC-owned experts and most of the leading medical groups in the U.S. have advised, and all are likely to sow confusion, undermine public trust, and ultimately drive the U.S. vaccination rates down. We are already hearing about pregnant women who test positive for Hep B deciding not to get the shot, said Dr. P.O., because the message they are getting from that recommendation is that the vaccine itself is dangerous. Proponents of the push to align U.S. recommendations with those of so-called peer nations such as Denmark, Japan, and Germany, all of which recommend fewer shots than the United States, have billed it as a common-sense corrective, but as innumerable doctors and scientists have explained, when it comes to public health, countries with fewer shots on their must-have list are not actually our peers in Denmark. To take the Trump and RFK Jr. favorite example, prenatal care is free and universal. More than 95% of pregnant women are screened for hepatitis B, and those who test positive are promptly treated and duly monitored. In Japan and in most European nations, primary care systems have the capacity to find and vaccinate children who face a higher risk for vaccine-preventable diseases, and in many of those countries, paid sick leave also helps minimize the spread of contagions through schools and offices. None of this is true in the United States. Here, nearly a quarter of pregnant women lack adequate prenatal care, and those who face the highest risk of contracting and spreading vaccine-preventable diseases are often the least likely to have access to doctors or pharmacies. When U.S. health officials tried to stamp out hepatitis B through vaccination programs aimed at high-risk groups, they failed miserably. It was not until they carried out a universal at-birth vaccination policy in 1991 that hepatitis B infections finally plummeted by about 99%. In fact, if the U.S. public health system has one thing going for it relative to other nations, it is probably vaccines. As the CDC-owned data indicates, routine childhood vaccination has prevented hundreds of millions of illnesses and tens of millions of hospitalizations. Here, it has also saved $500 billion in medical costs. A figure that jumps into the multi-trillions once you factor in indirect societal costs like lost productivity and lost wages. The United States tends to have higher rates of measles vaccination than Europe and fewer measles cases as a result compared with Denmark. We also tend to have lower hospitalization rates for rotavirus or RSV. The reason for those disparities is not in dispute. We vaccinate routinely against both viruses. Denmark does not. RFK Jr. and his supporters have said repeatedly that parents should be able to decide for themselves whether to vaccinate their children, but the Trump actions have put the nation on course for a future where even those who want vaccines may not be able to get them. Anytime you move away from a clear universal recommendation, implementation becomes more difficult, said Dr. FH, a vaccine expert who resigned from the CDC in protest in June. Does insurance still have to cover a shot that falls under shared clinical decision-making? Maybe. Can you still get it at the pharmacy? Not necessarily for now. Health insurers have promised to continue covering vaccines regardless of what the CDC does or says, presumably because they understand that vaccinating people is far cheaper than letting them get sick, but consumers would have no obvious recourse if those insurers eventually change their minds. And in any case, that promise applies only to families that have commercial health insurance to begin with. About half of all American children rely instead on the federally funded Vaccines for Children program, and that program falls squarely within the jurisdiction of RFK Jr., our chief U.S. person against vaccinations. If the CDC does change the childhood schedule to resemble that of DeMarc or scraps that schedule altogether, and if the health secretary decides to adjust the Vaccines for Children program accordingly, about half of all American families could suddenly find themselves with no clear way to get essential vaccines, their best possible protection against a roster of devastating diseases, including rotavirus, RSV, and hepatitis B. In the meantime, the Food and Drug Administration is angling to make an even bigger and more enduring impact on access to vaccines for Americans after claiming, without presenting a shred of proof, that COVID vaccines played a role in the death of 10 children. Top officials at the agency have proposed a roster of new requirements for the shots, including several that critics say would be logistically impossible and could leave us with no FDA-approved COVID or flu vaccines. That loss of approval would be disastrous. Dr. FH, and others say changes to the federal vaccine injury compensation program could also seriously undermine vaccine access. The program, which compensates people who suffer rare side effects from certain vaccines, was established in 1988 after a tidal wave of lawsuits threatened to drive vaccine makers from the American market if RFK Jr. decides to exempt any shot that falls under the fuzzy rubric of shared clinical decision-making from this program. And if nobody stops him, vaccine makers may once again threaten to leave the U.S. market. RFK Jr. could also drive those companies away by adding autism to the list of conditions for which they are potentially liable. Decades of research has debunked the assertion that vaccines cause autism, but RFK Jr. and his supporters have proved astoundingly impervious to that evidence. They will stop selling vaccines. Here, Dr. FH said vaccines are a triumph of human ingenuity, modern medicine, and public health. With them, we have beaten back smallpox, chickenpox, yellow fever, polio, measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis B, COVID, meningitis, and more. If RFK Jr. continues to force the nation down the course he is now set, we will be left to explain to future generations how we came to abandon them. 8 Trump family business delays launch of $499 gold smartphone. U.S. made device planned by end of year after hit by recent government shutdown affecting shipments. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The Guardian, December 31st, 2025. Trump Mobile, the phone company launched by the Trump family business, has pushed back plans to deliver a $499 equals to 371 pounds gold-colored smartphone by the end of the year. The Trump organization licensed its name to launch a mobile service and the device in June in the latest monetization of his presidency by a family business empire now run by the Trump sons. In the latest setback for the project, Trump Mobile said there was a strong possibility the handset would not be delivered this month because the recent government shutdown had disrupted shipments. The T1 smartphone, described by the company as proudly American, was initially promoted as a U.S.-made rival to devices from Apple and Samsung. Almost all smartphones sold in the U.S. are made overseas, primarily in China and South Korea, but also increasingly in India and Vietnam. The gold-colored phone was initially promised in August, and the website still states it will be released later this year. Customers are required to pay a $100 payment to order the device. The mobile service joins Trump-branded watches, footwear, and Bibles as products, capitalizing on his political brand. The venture will operate through licensing deals that generated more than $8 million for the president in 2024. The move into phones also raises questions about conflicts of interest, as the Trump family business operates in a sector that is heavily regulated by federal agencies over which Trump wields executive power. 9 Trump ended funding, including to the EPA and science research. Trump upended the federal government. The full scope of the impact is still unclear. President Trump achieved his goal of shrinking the workforce, but many current and former officials say the government is less dependable and efficient than it was a year ago. The Environmental Protection Agency, which has lost about 25% of its workforce, had $28 billion in grants terminated under the Trump administration. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 30th, 2025. In his first year back in office, President Trump has made unparalleled changes to the federal government, shrinking its footprint both in the services it provides and the size of its workforce. The extent of the effect on the public so far is unclear. Some of the White House moves are stalled by a mountain of litigation. More than 200 lawsuits have been filed challenging the firings of federal workers and the freezing of grants and elimination of programs, a vast majority of which are still pending, and agencies have not fully detailed the number of staff members and services that have been cut, making it difficult to discern the full scope of the difference between the federal government today and the one from a year ago. Trump pledged in February to make the government smaller, more efficient, more effective, and a lot less expensive by one specific standard. Trump can claim a degree of success. The workforce is definitely smaller. The number of civilian federal employees declined by about 10% this year, according to government data. After weathering months of threats and anxiety, many federal workers resigned or took early retirement. Others were laid off. In all, there are now about 249,000 fewer people on the government payroll than there were in the beginning of the year. However, there are indications that the Trump other goals have not yet been achieved, even after the Elon Musk bureaucracy shrinking initiative upended agencies across the government. Doge misstated its claims of large savings and failed to reduce federal spending, and many current and former officials and people who routinely interact with the federal government say that it is far less efficient and less dependable in the services it provides to the American public. Still, the public generally wants the government to cover some basic needs. In an April survey, Pew Research Center found that nearly all Americans felt the federal government had a responsibility to provide a strong military, a secure border, clean air and water, and national parks. Smaller majorities said it had a duty to provide high-quality education, health, insurance, and an adequate standard of living. Even some supporters of a leaner government say the Trump approach has not been effective. Spending continues to outpace economic growth. Most federal funds go to Medicare and Social Security, two programs that neither political party has the will to substantially change. That is also the case for another big-ticket item, paying interest on the debt. A lot of the spending reductions that I have observed coming from the administration have been less focused on cutting big budget items. Indeed, inside the government, federal workers said the focus on freezing initiatives related to climate change and environmental justice had overwhelmed other mandates. Among the top concerns about the drastic cuts to scientific research, the consequences may not be immediately apparent, and if more people are being diagnosed with cancer in 15 years, it will be difficult to point to the termination of specific grants as the reason. Scientists note the administration distributed about $13 billion in National Institutes of Health grants from February to June of this year, which is about $8 billion less than it did during the same time period a year earlier, according to the Government Accountability Office. This includes grants for cancer research. Cuts that have been described as the Trump America retreat from the war on the disease. Another agency that has been hard hit is the Environmental Protection Agency, which lost about 25% of its workforce. EPA is a skeleton of what it once was, which was an agency that cared about the air that people breathe, the water they drink, the land on which they live. Former EPA officials led the effort to ensure that research was transparent, objective, and credible before it went out the door. A large part of the job of one former EPA official was talking to researchers who raised concerns about their data being manipulated. Not long after Trump returned to the Oval Office, that former EPA official stopped hearing from employees. My phone literally stopped ringing, period, she said, adding that people were afraid of raising a concern and facing retribution. The EPA also had $28 billion in grants terminated, according to account by the website Grant Witness, a project run by data scientists tracking some government grants. The former FDA official was fired in February and is headed to Austria to begin a new research job with other American scientists, part of a larger European effort to take advantage of the Trump dismissal of top scientists. Is our government there for the public good, or is it in fact there for the interests of the leaders of the day? That is a question one former government official never thought he would pose in his lifetime. 10. Trump pulled funding of National Public Radio. NPR CEO was a right-wing target. Then the real trouble started. Catherine Marr has taken an unyielding approach to the NPR biggest battles, which has sometimes put her at odds with her colleagues in public media. Catherine Marr, the chief executive of NPR, has dealt with plenty of criticism this year. Did she consider quitting? I really do not like bullies, she said. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 30th, 2025. Catherine Marr knew that running NPR was going to be difficult. Congress stripped more than $500 million in annual funding from public media, while web traffic to NPR.org has declined this year. A spokeswoman for NPR said the NPR total digital reach was up, factoring in platforms like YouTube, where the NPR Tiny Desk concerts are popular, and the NPR broadcast audience has increased roughly 8% this year, according to Radio Research Consortium. 11. Virginia health and medicine. Decades of abuse by a Virginia doctor are finally addressed in court. Hundreds sue Virginia hospital and executives over unneeded surgeries. More than 500 women claimed that they had received unnecessary operations. Hospital leaders said they were not aware of the misconduct of a doctor. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 29, 2025. More than 500 women sued a Virginia health system and its senior executives on Monday for negligence, claiming that for nearly a decade one doctor performed medically unjustified operations, including unnecessary C-sections and sterilizations, without consent. The 510 plaintiffs are seeking $10 million each from the Chesapeake Regional Medical Center, which employed the doctor. The former gynecologist Javaid Perwaiz already is serving a 59-year prison sentence for Medicaid fraud stemming from the unnecessary operations. His medical license expired in 2020. Around 2008, the neonatology group of the Chesapeake Regional Medical Center raised concerns about the Perwaiz routine delivery of babies early through elective induction or C-section for no medical reason. The need for intensive neonatal care for the babies Perwaiz delivered early was so common that CRMC neonatologists referred to it as the Perwaiz special. The lawsuit said nurses complained to hospital officials that consent forms were being altered for the Perwaiz patients after they were under anesthesia so that he could perform more invasive surgeries, and that patients often lacked knowledge about their planned surgeries. According to the lawsuit, the plaintiffs also allege Perwaiz also routinely misclassified inpatient surgeries as outpatient procedures to evade the heightened scrutiny of inpatient procedures. Although there were complaints about abuses by the doctor in 2014 and 2015, according to the suit, the internal metrics of the medical center identified him as a top 10 performer, a single surgeon who did more procedures each year than some group practices did. 12 United Kingdom artificial intelligence used to subvert elections, although the motive may be more financial than political China-based interference. Did Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer impose a curfew in the UK? No, it is a fake TikTok video. AI has made it easy to put words in the mouths of people, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain has become a favourite target. The motive, experts say, is not political, but financial. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization. The New York Times, December 30th, 2025. The 61-second video of Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain would be shocking if it were true. The United Kingdom is set to introduce a nationwide curfew beginning at 11 p.m. each night, he appears to say on one of thousands of TikTok videos of him posted in the last 6 months. Starmer never made any such policy or announcement, but thanks to rapidly advancing AI technology, the Prime Minister in the short video sounded eerily like the real one with his nasal lilt. The fake video attracted more than 430,000 views and inspired similar posts on X and Facebook. That video and other similar ones appears to have been taken down by the Chinese-owned social media company, which officially prohibits fake authoritative sources or crisis events or falsely shows public figures in certain contexts. But the clip was just one of 6,042 such videos, most featuring Starmer, identified by NewsGuard, a company that tracks online misinformation. Between May and December 2025, in a recent report, the company said the videos were posted by accounts with names of fake British-sounding news organizations like BBB UK News and Daily Britain News. Together, the accounts had more than 1 million followers when the report was issued in the immediate days after NewsGuard published its report on December 9th. Many of the videos of Starmer remained available on TikTok. By December 19th, most appeared to have been removed from the platform. But the use of artificial intelligence in politics is increasing rapidly, especially as a way for political consultants and campaign managers to test out how issues will play with the public. These are how bad actors learn. We know it is internationally pervasive now. He said 4 of every 5 elections around the world now have AI-generated political junk that is unattributed and clearly misleading. 13 United Kingdom, Scotland, the Shetland Islands, Archipelago, Lerwick. Wood-burning tradition. Rozep view the wood burning in Lerwick contributes to climate change with the emission of carbon dioxide and PM 2.5 and creates air pollution that harms human life and shortens human lives. Some traditions are so stupid they should not be honored, and the old bad traditions of the past should not be reenacted. Will exposing the stupidity of this tradition deter people from participating? Will exposing the stupidity of this tradition drive stupid people who may practice unnecessary indoor residential wood burning at home to make the trek to a remote island to burn even more wood unnecessarily, thus exposing themselves to the air pollution at close range and increasing their risk of unnecessarily developing illnesses and early deaths? From the article headline, it is bigger than Hogmanay, the Shetland Up Heli AA Viking Fire Festival, the raucous celebration of the new year, and the Nordic heritage of the Shetland Islands culminates in the ritual burning of a longship and much drinking. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization. The Guardian, December 31st, 2025. In Lerwick, the capital of the Shetland Islands Archipelago, the locals honor the Scandinavian influences on Shetland Vikings in homemade costumes, brandish axes and round shields. They carry turquoise standards bearing the flag of Harold Olafsson, the 13th century king of Man and the Isles, and sing battle songs of raven flags flying in distant lands, of blazing torches, and Vikings ruling over oceans vast. A blue longship with a dragon prow emerges, pulled on ropes by a team dozen strong. This beautiful galley will be paraded through the streets of Lerwick today before being ritualistically set ablaze as the centerpiece of Up Heli A at the Shetland Riotous Fire Festival. There is nothing else to do around here all winter. Hogmanay is dying in Shetland. Up Heli AA is the biggest thing of the year. The Up Heli AA is a series of fire festivals setting the archipelago alight between January and March time to mark the end of the pre-Christian winter festival of Yule. These are the modern incarnation of the original tar-barreling squads who have nowadays swapped brawling in the streets for touring venues across Lerwick. On Up Heli at night, the procession files into a play park in the center of town, where the galley ship lies waiting, doused in paraffin. The Jarl squad throw their lit torches into the boat, and it is engulfed in flames as a crowd watches the fire dies down, and the spectators file away. It is almost painful to think of the energy and care that went into the creation of the galley ship, only for it to go up in flames. Up Heli A 2026 will take place on January 27, 2026, in Lerwick, Shetland. 15 Europe and United Kingdom mass transit interrupted. Eurostar cancels all trains after power failure in Channel Tunnel. The high-speed train service connecting Britain and continental Europe was paralyzed on Tuesday during one of the busiest travel weeks of the year. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization. The New York Times, December 30th, 2025. Eurostar, the high-speed train service connecting Britain and continental Europe, said all of its trains were canceled until further notice after a major power failure inside the Channel Tunnel. The disruption caused by a fault in the overhead power supply and the subsequent breakdown of a train within the 31-mile tunnel left passengers stranded for hours. The Eurostar terminal in London St. Pancras International Station was jammed with passengers trying to rearrange their plans. 16 Ukraine Bogus Claim that Ukraine attack near a Putin residence aims to push Trump toward supporting Russia over Ukraine. How Russia and Ukraine are fighting to shape the Trump view of the war off the battlefield. Each side is trying to influence the Trump perception of the military conflict as they look to negotiate a peace settlement in their favor. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 30th, 2025. As President Volodymyr Zelenskyy of Ukraine traveled back from Florida on Monday, he could breathe a sigh of relief. His meeting with President Trump to discuss a peace plan seemed to have passed without drama. The American leader had neither berated him nor echoed Kremlin talking points, at least publicly by the standards of past encounters that counted as progress. But while Zelenskyy was en route home, Putin was on the phone With Trump introducing a new twist, Putin claimed that a Ukrainian drone attack had targeted one of his residences in Russia overnight. "I do not like it," Trump later told reporters. As he recounted the call, "It is not the right time to do any of that. I was very angry about it. The accusation was just the sort that could derail the Ukraine diplomatic effort." Zelenskyy swiftly denied it, describing the claim on social media as a complete fabrication designed to undermine all achievements of our shared diplomatic efforts with the Trump team. He reinforced the denial in a voice message to reporters in an online chat group, and his foreign minister also weighed in. Meanwhile, several Russian officials relayed the accusation publicly, saying Moscow would toughen its stance in the negotiations. As a response, the Ukraine negotiating position includes a financial package to support the Ukraine post-war reconstruction. An American involvement. Zelenskyy has said that it would include the entry of American business special conditions for the Ukraine development and reconstruction and the development of a free trade agreement with the United States. On Sunday, as he greeted Zelenskyy at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, Trump marveled at the money that could be made from rebuilding Ukraine. "There is a lot of wealth to be had," he said. 17 Ukraine attack on global food security as Russia hits wheat ships and ports. U.S. has verified as fake the claimed attack on Putin residence, says Zelenskyy. Leaders of the allies of Ukraine to meet in France next week. What we know on day 1407. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The Guardian. December 30th, 2025. Russia launched waves of drones to attack the Black Sea ports of Pivdeniye and Kornomorsk, with 2 civilian ships hit as they arrived to load wheat. The Ukrainian Navy and government officials said the Panama-flagged civilian vessels Emikris 3 and Captain Karam were struck, said the Navy, adding that the attacks on Tuesday threatened the lives of civilians and undermine global food security. Targeted strikes on civilian objects are a deliberate war crime. Ukraine is a major agricultural producer and exporter. Oil storage tanks were also hit, said Oleksiy Kuleba, the Ukrainian deputy prime minister, who added that both ports continued to operate. The Russia continued and intensifying strikes on Ukraine are an act of defiance against the U.S. plan to end the Ukraine war, a French presidential source said on Tuesday. Additionally, the Moscow allegations of a Ukrainian drone attack against a residence of Vladimir Putin are not backed by any solid proof, including after cross-checking information with our partners. The source said the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said regarding the attack on the Putin residence at Valdai, "Our negotiating team connected with the American team. They went through the details, and we understand that it is fake, and of course our partners can always verify thanks to their technical capabilities that it was fake." 18 South Africa solar energy from China. Cheap solar is transforming lives and economies across Africa. Chinese panels are now so affordable that businesses and families are snapping them up, slashing their bills and challenging utilities. What is happening in suburban Cape Town is being repeated at factories, shopping malls, dentist offices, gold mines, and other businesses. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. December 30th, 2025. For IB, a dentist in Cape Town. Patients showed up for appointments only to find the power had gone out. No power meant no x-rays, no fillings, no root canals. "I just could not work," IB the dentist said. South Africans like IB the dentist have found a remedy for power cuts that have plagued people in the developing world for years, thanks to swiftly falling prices of Chinese-made solar panels and batteries. They now draw their power from the sun. These are not the tiny old-school solar lanterns that once powered a light bulb or TV in rural communities. Today, solar and battery systems are deployed across a variety of businesses, such as auto factories and wineries, gold mines, and shopping malls, and they are changing everyday life, trade, and industry in the biggest economy in Africa. This has happened at startling speed. Solar has risen from almost nothing in 2019 to roughly 10% of the electricity generating capacity of South Africa. Power moves inside the China drive to dominate clean energy. There is a race to power the future. China is pulling away. Beijing is selling clean energy to the world. Washington is pushing oil and gas. Both are driven by national security. No longer do South Africans depend entirely on giant coal-burning plants that have defined how people worldwide got their electricity for more than a century. What is happening in South Africa is repeating across the continent. Key to this shift, the ambition of China to lead the world in clean energy over the past decade. While the United States ramped up fossil fuel exports, China has focused on dominating renewables. Today, Chinese companies make so many of the solar panels, electric vehicles, and batteries of the world that they are slashing prices and scrambling to find buyers. Tariffs have thwarted them somewhat in the United States and Europe, but they are finding enormous new markets in Africa, where around 600 million people lack reliable electricity. Across the continent, solar imports from China rose 50% the first 10 months of 2025, continuing a trend. According to a review of Chinese export data by Ember, a British energy tracking group, South Africa was the largest destination for Chinese solar, but not the only one. Sierra Leone imported the equivalent of more than half its total current electricity generating capacity, and Chad, nearly half state-owned power. China is also building utility-scale solar farms in South Africa, as in other developing economies, and now China is bidding on contracts from the state-owned utility Eskom to add 14,000 kilometers, about 8,700 miles of transmission lines that South Africa desperately needs to move its increasing supply of solar power around the country. Chinese firms hold similar build-operate contracts in countries, including Brazil. In the Philippines, the solar surge does little to address the most pressing social and economic problems of developing countries like South Africa. The need to generate new jobs for millions of young citizens. Installation labor is local, but the panels and batteries are almost all made in China. Jobs are created elsewhere. South Africa consumes advanced green technologies without capturing the industrial benefits. Every kilowatt generated by privately owned solar installations is a Hit to its bottom line, the Eskom coal burning plants, which provide most of power in South Africa, are old, and in poor shape. Power cuts have subsided recently, but it was not long ago that Eskom had to turn off electricity to some areas for hours at a time, a practice called load shedding that hurt the economy and fed public anger during the worst days of load shedding, the latest of which came in early 2024. Even Ms. GM, the deputy electricity minister, installed a solar system in her home. Her energy bill, she said, fell by 2/3. Multiply her hack by the thousands, and you have what South Africans call the Eskom death spiral. Well-off customers lower their bills with solar, which causes Eskom to lose money, which in turn forces Eskom to raise prices and encourages more people to install solar. It does not help that some people tap power lines to draw electricity illegally without paying for it, or that Eskom has suffered years of mismanagement in the past 5 years. Alone, South Africans installed solar panels representing more than 7 gigawatts, or about a tenth of the total installed capacity of 55 gigawatts. Most is privately owned. Now unable to beat solar, Eskom is joining solar. The utility has removed onerous licensing requirements on private installations. It has allowed people to sell power to the grid, and it has tweaked its rates so that customers pay a fixed charge in addition to the cost of any power they consume. Essentially, people pay simply to be connected to the grid, a standard feature in other nations that is new in South Africa. South Africa lacks policies to require local manufacturing, but creating them would drive up costs. The prices of made-in-China panels are by far the lowest in the world. The South Africa rapid pivot to Chinese solar gear, as affordable as it is, also does not resolve a basic problem. The poorest citizens in South Africa still cannot afford to put up their own panels. They lack the money to buy the gear outright and the ability to get. China overtook the U.S. as the biggest trading partner of South Africa in 2008, with its trade gap rising to more than $9 billion in 2023 compared with barely $1 billion in 2000. There are increasing calls to make South African trade relations with China less unequal. The difference between the South Africa trade ties with China and with the U.S. is stark. President Trump has imposed a 30% tariff on South African goods and excluded the government from participating in an international summit of the 20 biggest economies of the world. Trump has also reversed a Biden administration plan to help the country accelerate its planned closures of its oldest, dirtiest coal plants as relations with the United States have become increasingly strained. Beijing has positioned itself as a reliable and sympathetic partner.
Red-green fox here. The quick red-green fox jumped over the barriers to clean air. Red-green fox here. Ready to sing to you the names of the 2025 major wood-burning biomass industry subsidy opponents. 1 Biofuel Watch. 2 Bulkley Valley Stewardship Coalition of British Columbia, Canada. 3 Kommite Luft, which means Beautiful Air Committee in German. 4 Dogwood Alliance. 5 Equity Group Foundation, nicknamed EGF. 6 Environmental Paper Network, nicknamed EPN. 7 Natural Resources Defense Council, nicknamed NRDC. 8 Prakaunia Narzexwisistik Istit, which means Workshop for All Beings in Polish. 9 Rachel Carson Council. 10 Solutions for Our Climate, nicknamed SFOC.
Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies, which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. Rosette view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions. Yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burn tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burn tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burn tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, The Eco-Design with Stoven International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. ROSEP Purple Air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.